While we're giving time for everyone to join, I want to share a video with you guys that SRF shared with you yesterday, but we want to make sure you have a chance to see it. So we're going to share that video in this kind of time where we're giving everybody a chance to get connected and joined in. Attending this morning and participating. We're excited to have a large group of people that are showing some interest this morning in our program. So we're going to spend about the next hour kind of walking you through what the program is going to look like and a little bit of an introduction to what you'll be learning so that you can be prepared and know what to expect in the coming months with this training program. So, and if you have questions, feel free to use the chat to ask questions and we'll address them as they come in. We're just gonna start off today with letting you know a little bit about who we are. And we wanted to start that by saying that this project wouldn't be possible without the vision and the funding from the Tennessee Department of Environment and Conservation. And here in just a minute, we're going to give them a few minutes to talk to you about why they wanted to fund this project, what their vision is for the project, and why you should have access to this training series. So here in just a minute, we'll turn it over to them. In the meantime, we want to let you know who we are. So the group that I'm with that will be providing the training and the assistance is called the Southwest Environmental Finance Center, or Southwest EFC, or SWEFC. And we're a part of the University of New Mexico. We're located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And as a part of the University of New Mexico, we're within the School of Engineering. The Southwest EFC focuses on helping water and wastewater systems to answer the questions in the technical, financial, and managerial areas of operations for water and wastewater. And we do provide training on a very wide variety of topics. This group of the EFC team has most recently focused on training in asset management and water loss. And those two really do go hand in hand. But this training series, of course, we're going to be focusing on water loss control programs. So the last thing about the Southwest EFC is our mission statement. It's shown here, and we have those words bolded there for a reason, because we do come at water loss control from this asset management background, and we want the program that you develop to be based on taking actions. So what those actions will be are going to be dependent upon you and your system and where you're at. But the overall goal is to use this program, these actions, to help your system improve over time. So now a little bit about the three of us as trainers. My name is Dawn Nall, and my background is in engineering. So for me, water is life, both in my career and in my personal life. So whether I'm at work, working with drinking water systems and wastewater systems, or I'm boating on the Tennessee River, or swimming in the pool in the backyard, or vacationing at a beach somewhere, getting a taste of the salt water, I tend to be focused on water. And the reason that I boat on the Tennessee River is that while I work for the Southwest EFC and did once live in Albuquerque, I now live in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I do have some things in common with some of you guys, hopefully. And maybe I'm a little bit more of a local than not. I've been in Tennessee for about 13 years now. So I call it home and I love it. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm going to let Heather introduce herself.
Hi all, my name is Heather Himmelberger, and I'm the director of the Southwest Environmental Finance Center. And I would say I'm an engineer by training, but I'm in operations management and finance by choice. So I learned very early on in my career, when I was sent out into the world of water and wastewater to do troubleshooting and startups and operation and maintenance manuals and all of those sorts of things, to really learn how these water and wastewater utilities work, that I like that part way better than the design part. So although I've done design of water and wastewater treatment plants, that was not my passion. My passion is out and about working with people who run and manage water and wastewater utilities. So for about the past 26 years or so, I've been working at the Environmental Finance Center, and have been director most of that time, and really like getting out and about and working with people to better manage and operate and maintain their facilities. And I've been doing asset management and water loss for quite a few years now, and I do travel all over the country. So although I'm not from Tennessee, I'm actually from Pennsylvania, and lived there for a good part of my life before I moved to New Mexico. I do travel to all 50 states. I've been to all 50 states multiple times each. I have driven Tennessee from corner to corner. I couldn't even tell you how many times, making that Memphis to Knoxville sort of trek across the state through Nashville. So I have been through Tennessee, again, more times than I could count, and have, really think it's a beautiful state. And I'm really happy to be here today and for the rest of the series, working with you all on water loss issues.
And now I'll turn it over to James. Maybe. There we go.
There we go. So hi, everyone. I've been with the EFC for about 5 years now. I have a little bit of an odd background. I started in law, moved to operations management, and then shifted to engineering. So I have a somewhat different background than my coworkers. I'm normally based in Albuquerque, but I'm currently up in Seattle for the next month or so. So we're actually talking to you from at least 3 time zones. When I focus primarily on asset management and water loss control in my work life, and when I'm not doing that, I'm usually either walking my dog or down in the basement building guitars, one of which you can see on the screen there. Unfortunately, I build them better than I play them, but I do play them as well. So thanks for joining us, and I look forward to being in this project with y'all.
All right, thanks guys. So we're gonna take just a few minutes to talk to you. Well, we're not gonna talk to you. We're gonna have, we're gonna ask Vina to join us and to share some information about the purpose of the program. So Vina, feel free to take it away.
Hi guys, I apologize. I thought we were going to have engineering services speak first for TDEC, and I invite Angela to do that.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Angela Jones, and I'm the manager of the Engineering Services Unit in the Division of Water Resources at TDEC. And reducing water loss is really important to the division. We've made it a priority over the past few years. George Garden, who was our former chief engineer, and I spent over a year traveling the state and speaking at different commissioner and board member training sessions, and really emphasizing the financial impact of water loss to the board members and commissioners. We've also updated the scoring criteria for CDBG grants to include points for proper mapping and measuring and planning for water loss projects. And we really felt that the next step was to provide this comprehensive training through the Southwest Environmental Finance Center to help you all find out where the water loss is in your systems and then how to reduce that water loss. So we're really happy to see the interest in this program, and we're really looking forward to seeing everyone's progress throughout the program. So now I'll turn it back over to Vina.
Thanks, Angela, and thanks Southwest Environmental Finance Center for sticking with it and getting this program launched. SRF is really excited to be here today, and we are really happy to support this endeavor. The State Revolving Fund is a program of DWR and its Division of Water Resources Water Infrastructure Financing Program. And we are always happy to support the shared goals of water loss. So we do that in two ways at State Revolving Fund. One way is that we support and fund technical assistance opportunities like this. The other way is providing extremely competitive interest rates for communities across Tennessee. And you guys just saw the video earlier this morning. This launch of this webinar series happens to coincide with our solicitation period. So we're really excited to be able to push that idea with you guys. You know, we really provide flexible loan terms to communities for a wide array of drinking water projects. Our extremely low interest rates are based on a community's economic status or ability to pay. So, you know, the more challenge you have, especially if you're a small and disadvantaged community, the more assistance we like to give you. But every community that can demonstrate their project meets green criteria can reduce their already below market rates even further. So water loss is one of those criteria, right? If you can demonstrate that your project really meets green criteria and is a water loss project, you can take your already low SRF interest rates and reduce them even further. We work with small and disadvantaged communities to provide principal forgiveness, either from 20% up to 50% for their project. And, you know, I saw Brooksy Carlton was on the line here with ECD. The State Revolving Fund loves to team up with rural development and economic and community development and talk about shared solutions, especially funding solutions for communities in need. And I can't say enough about how interested SRF is in helping all you communities, and realize that you don't just get SRF, you get the entire DWR family, right? The Division of Water Resources, to try and help address your solutions. So I just am pitching the program, guys. We're happy to be here and really want to thank everybody for considering water loss an important issue.
Great, thank you, Angela and Vina, I appreciate it. So we're going to talk to you first about how this program is going to work and what you can expect out of it. So we want to talk to you about when the trainings will be offered, what activities will be provided, and the assistance that we will be providing to you as well. So let's start with the trainings that are going to be offered. So on your screen here, you can see the different types of trainings, and the training sessions are going to be offered over the next year. We do have dates and times planned for the sessions number 3, 4, and 5 here, and I'm going to show you those dates and times shortly. But first, I want you to understand the overall series and what we want to, work with you to accomplish. And I also want to point out that classes 2 through 7 here are approved for operator certification hours. classes 8 through 11 are not. They're more of opportunities for you to hear from your peers and to hear from vendors about water loss detection technologies. So those are a little bit of a deeper dive into water loss technology, water loss control technologies. Class number 1 is something we want to point out. It is a recorded class. It's on our website. I'll show you where you can get that here in just a bit, but it's available for anyone to view. And that website covers the AWWA water audit software and how you go about completing it. So you should be familiar with it if you've completed it for the state requirements, but if you're not already completely comfortable with that software, you should take the time to view this webinar. It's a 30-minute webinar, and again, we'll show the link to that webinar here in just a bit. Class number 2 on the list is what we're doing right now, so you can get credits for attending today. And then class number 3 is where we'll kind of get started with the teaching series, the training series, the workshops. And that's where we'll walk you through developing your water loss control program. You'll learn about the various types of non-revenue water and how you can account for them as we go through this program. And then class number 4 will focus on, I think I have missed some words here, but at any rate, I apologize for that. I got distracted. But class number 4, we're going to talk about your goals and setting your goals, and how you can use your goals to determine what data you should be collecting and what data you should be focusing on to be able then to make better decisions about controlling your water loss, reducing your water loss, increasing your revenue. In class number 5, we're going to help you to understand the differences between your data accuracy and your data validity, and then how you can use that information to make decisions about how to move forward, what actions to take. So classes number 6 and number 7, we start to get into those actions. We start looking at your losses, your apparent losses, and then your real losses and the ways that you might go about reducing them. And then, as I mentioned, classes 8, 9, and 10, you'll have these opportunities to hear from systems in the state that are using water loss detection and what they've learned in the process, what the outcomes have been. And then we'll give you a chance to ask them some questions kind of in a roundtable environment. And then we'll give you an opportunity to do the same with the water detection, leak detection vendors in the state, so that you can ask them questions if you're curious about how their technology works or whatever questions you might have. So those last sessions there are opportunities for you to learn more from your peers and then from the vendors. And then finally, we'll do a wrap-up class where we allow you to kind of share your successes, and for us to kind of look at the steps that you might be taking into the future of your water loss control program. So that's the overall process that we'll go through to help you develop your water loss control program. Each of the classes that we offer will be offered live 3 different times, except for those that are the water loss detection discussions. So the classes will be also be recorded, and they can be viewed at a later date if you can't attend one of them live. However, if you attend live, you will be able to get operator certification credits. If you attend the recorded sessions, we can't keep track of that and submit it to the state, so there won't be an opportunity to get credits there. We prefer our classes to be interactive, to have you guys be involved and to be able to participate. And in order to do that, we want the class sizes to be relatively small. We also want you to be able to get to know your neighbors, so to speak, that are doing water loss. So we're asking that if the dates work for you, that you attend the classes that are scheduled for your region. If they don't, if the dates or the times don't work for you, then we ask that you do still attend a class that's outside of your region. So there's not any harm in attending a class outside of your region. It's just an opportunity for you to get to know others in your region that are doing water loss. And we do find oftentimes that there is a lot of value in that, to be able to talk to your neighbors and find out what they're doing and who they're working with and how things are going for them. So that's the reason that we're having each class 3 different times, to keep the class size small and to be able to offer that regional aspect. So when you look at the dates and times, we'll list the region, and here they are. And you can see we do have dates and times set for those first 3 classes. And then once we've kind of had a few classes, we want to get some feedback from you on the timing and the time between classes, and make adjustments if necessary. So that's why we're not going to put everything on the calendar. We do want to get your feedback and make sure that it's working well for everyone. Not only are the classes offered 3 different times, they're also offered on 3 different days of the week. So if you have a standing meeting on Thursday, that's okay. It shouldn't conflict with every opportunity, because we're covering 3 different days of the week. And then we also want to point out that, as you know, Tennessee does cover 2 time zones. And so we're listing the classes in the time zone of the region. So if you attend in your region, it will be in your time zone. But if you attend outside of your region, make sure you check the time zone so that you don't show up an hour early or an hour late. So we just want to make you very aware of that we're going to list everything in the region's time zone to the greatest extent possible. So if you're in your region, shouldn't be any problem at all. But if you do venture out of your region, make sure you're aware of that. And then as James mentioned, not only does Tennessee cover 2 time zones, but my colleagues are currently working in the other 2 time zones of the US. So we can make ourselves confused pretty easily. So we're trying to be really clear about time zones and what time things will start and end. And then, as I mentioned, operator certification credits will be available. When you register, we need you to be certain that you put your name, your certificate type, and your operator ID number into the registration. And then we will submit the report of continuing education activity to the state at the conclusion of each training session for the operator certification based on your attendance. So registering won't necessarily get you credit. You have to attend to get credit. And so make sure that when you register that you get your name right, your certificate type, and your operator ID number. If for some reason something goes awry, feel free to let us know, but this will be the way that we go about submitting to the state for your credits. As I mentioned before, I wanted to show you where you could find the recordings. So the pre-recorded webinar that you can view right now is on our website. This webinar will be up in the next day or so. And then every time we do a training session, since we're doing 3 of them, at the end of the 3 series, we will put the webinar on this website as well. So this is what comes up when you go to the Southwest EFC. So it's SWEFC, as you can see down here at the bottom, swefc.unm.edu. That's our home page. And if you scroll down our home page, you will see a link to the Tennessee Water Loss Assistance, or you can type this address in and it will take you straight to the Tennessee Water Loss Assistance. So when you scroll down from our homepage, you will find this featured projects area, and you can see over here on the right is the Tennessee Water Loss Assistance. And you click here and it takes you into the area that will have all of the recordings hosted. So that's how you can access them, always from our homepage, but I'll go back here just a second. If you want to have the address that takes you directly there, you would need to add the home Tennessee Water Loss Assistance with hyphens in between each word. So,
And Don, I'll just add one other thing about finding us on the web. We're really easy to search. If you type in the Google search bar Southwest EFC, we should be the very first thing that comes up. So we're fairly easy to find. Like if you forget our webpage and you just remember, you know, Southwest EFC or even UNM EFC, searching in Google, you know, using that Southwest EFC name will take you right, typically we're the first thing that comes up on the search engine. So it's pretty easy to find us that way too.
Great, thanks, Heather. All right, so we're gonna take just a quick little glimpse into an overview of the training program. And where this is coming from is currently you're completing a water balance and submitting it to the state. Your water system has to submit that with your financials each year. Why are you completing this water balance? What's the reason? Well, the state wants you to use this tool so that you can better understand your non-revenue water, understand your real losses, and then look at ways that you might increase your revenue and decrease your water loss. But this means that you have to take some actions. You have to use the water audit to make some decisions. And this water loss control program will give you the tools to do that. So what kind of tools are we talking about? Well, the water audit that you complete is one of those tools and is typically considered the first step of the program, but it is a diagnostic tool. It's not perfect, but it does give you good information to guide your decision making. But this tool should be just one of many that you're using in your water loss control program. So we'll be talking to you about the different types of action-oriented tools. We'll introduce those tools to you, and those are the tools that can really help you to make some changes. And then, of course, you get to decide how you use all of your tools. The reason that we want you to have a water loss control program is because we don't want you to mismatch the remedy and the problem. If you don't use the tools you have, you could apply a remedy to a problem that doesn't end up solving anything, and you could end up wasting time and money. And you know, we've worked with systems that we've seen this happen before, where specifically we worked with a system that used leak detection technology on their distribution system, and they didn't find many leaks at all. And they were convinced that that just couldn't be true. So they did the leak detection again, only to find that they really didn't have a water loss problem that was related to leaks. They had a water loss problem that was related to data. So we want you to avoid mismatching the remedy and the problem. But there are other reasons to engage in water loss control activities besides money. So I want you to kind of think right now about what other benefits there might be if you could reduce your water loss and increase your revenue by implementing a water loss control program at your system. So think about that. What benefits might there be? And then in a little bit, Heather's going to talk to you about some more of those possible benefits. And let's see if you've put all of them on your list that Heather has on hers. Oh, jumping slides now. So not only will we offer you the training programs to walk you through developing the water loss control program, we want to help you implement what you learned. So after each session, we'll provide you with an applied activity that your team can use to put into practice what you've learned. So this activity is kind of a guide that will walk you through the steps of implementing the particular activity that you learned about that day. So you should be able to learn about it and then apply it at your system so you can put what you learned into practice. But finally, we want to point out that you don't have to do this alone. We are here to help you. So the Southwest EFC team and additional team members you may be introduced to later. So we have a large team that can help. can provide assistance to you, technical assistance, and it's available to any system that needs it. So all you have to do is let us know that you are interested in this type of assistance, and we will work with you to answer any questions you have, to review any content you'd like assistance with. If you're working on one of the applied activities and you get stuck, or you don't understand the question, or you're not sure where to go to get the data, you can give us a call, you can email us, and we're happy to help. And all of the assistance, we just wanted to mention, is at no cost to you because it's through our contract with the state. So the state is pretty serious about you guys being able to make progress in this and allowing us to assist you at no cost to you. So we just wanted to make sure that you know that you're not in this alone. We're not just going to preach at you and walk away. We want to work with you in this process. So now I'm going to turn things over to Heather, and I'm going to let her talk to you more about the water loss control program.
So what we're going to talk about now is a question I have for you, and I want to use the chat feature. So I have shown on the bottom of my screen what it looks like on my computer, and I do have an Apple computer, so it's possible that my chat bar doesn't look, or my control bar doesn't look exactly like yours, but somewhere you should have a item on your control bar that says chat. And if you click on that, it will open up a chat window that shows a possibility for you to type in, and then you can see what others have typed in as well. So I want you to think about this question that I put on the screen. What do you think a water loss control program is? So when you think of a water loss control program, what do you think it is? And I'm going to type into the chat feature. So I'm putting the question in there so you can see it come up in your chat bar or your chat window. So again, if you have a chat window or a chat feature, just click on that chat. Again, mine looks like a little thought bubble that says the word chat underneath. And sometimes there's, if your whole chat or your whole bar isn't showing, you might have to click the Zoom window to get it to come up, or you might have, sometimes there's something that says more and you have to click in there and it'll bring up this ability to get to your chat window. So hopefully everybody is finding the chat window, and just go ahead and type in what you think a water loss control program is. So, and all answers are acceptable. Just wanted to kind of see what's on your minds, what you're thinking of. So we're having some answers come in: finding and managing loss in your system, hunting water leaks, ways to recapture lost revenue, a way to quantify the water produced versus sold and reasons for the difference, monitoring water loss and a plan to remedy, leak detection and response, a program that helps minimize water loss, finding water leaks, finding issues, cost of producing water and money lost. So great, those are all fantastic answers. So here's what I think of it as: the whole collection of activities to address non-revenue water. So if that's kind of the definition, this whole collection of activities to address non-revenue water, we need to think about what non-revenue water is. So that'll be our next sort of thing to think about, is what is non-revenue water? So there's three main categories. The first is water we authorize someone to use, but we don't seek a payment for. Water that reaches a user in some way, and it should be paid for, but it either isn't or it isn't fully paid for. And water that was produced but never reached a user at all. So if we think of this really simplified equation, the water we produce minus the water we sell, everything else is non-revenue water. So it's all the water that's left over. So basically it's anything that somebody doesn't pay for. So whether that somebody is a governmental entity or customer or whoever, anything that's not paid for is the non-revenue water. So a little bit of terminology. Again, these are the three categories we just talked about. All of them represent non-revenue water. And then we have this term water losses. And it's important to know that there is a difference between non-revenue water and water losses. And it's that portion that we authorize someone to use, but don't seek payment for. And every utility is going to have some water in this category because it includes that water that you use yourself to flush your system for water quality reasons, or if you're testing fire hydrants or fighting fires. There's lots of uses. Maybe if you have wells and you're flushing your wells at the beginning, each time they turn on. There's lots of reasons why you're going to use water, and you have to use that water, but you're not charging yourself. So as a utility, you're typically not charging yourself for using that water for flushing and those other purposes. Sometimes people have additional flow in this category where it might be parks that get free water, or maybe sports fields or city government buildings, anything like that. We had one utility that very purposefully wanted to use free water for all their sports fields because they wanted children to stay in the community and play there, as opposed to going elsewhere. So they chose to make the parks as cheap as possible and use free water to water the parks. So it's whatever you authorize to use, but you're not seeking payment, and remembering that there is that difference between water loss and non-revenue water, because many times those terms are used interchangeably and they're not quite the same thing. So if we look at just the water loss portion, the two categories we talked about before fall into apparent water loss and real water loss. So the water that's reaching a user and you're not getting all the revenue for it, that's apparent water loss. So it's not water that's leaving the system, it's water that's being used, but you're not getting all of the revenue you should for that water. So we call that apparent water loss, or sometimes it's referred to as paper water loss, because it's not actually water leaking from the system. And then the second kind, the water that's produced but never reaches a user, is that water that we call real water loss. It's the water that's leaking from your pipes, your services, overflowing storage tanks, leaks in your storage tanks, anything like that where you've produced the water but it's not actually reaching a user. That's the real water loss portion. So one part of a water loss control program is estimating the volume in each of those NRW categories, or non-revenue water categories. So a water balance or an audit can be used for that purpose. And one option there is the AWWA free water audit software, the M36 methodology. And as Dawn said, there is a recorded webinar that James, Dawn, and I did about a couple weeks ago, and it's up on the website. You can listen to it, and it describes the audit in more detail. We are not going to talk further about the audit today because many of you have been doing it for a number of years and you're probably very familiar with it. So we wanted to not take the time today to go into the audit, but it is available on our website if you'd like to learn more information about it. So the most important part of the audit or water balance is to account for all the water. And I noticed that there were some chats recently about searching for unaccounted for water and ways to find unaccounted water. And so what we're trying to do is not have unaccounted water. So I think you're on the right track there. The point of this is to, instead of having this big category like we used to, that we just said was unaccounted, it's water we don't know where it's going. We want to change that and say we do know where the water is going. We want to account for all of it and put it in a balance so we know where all that water is. We assume that all categories can be measured or estimated except one. And the one that can't be measured or estimated is that real loss volume, because we really don't know what's happening beneath the ground. So what we're going to do is estimate or measure all of the inputs in our system, estimate or measure all of the outputs from our system, and all these outputs are over here on the right-hand side, and all the inputs are over here on the left-hand side. If we know all the inputs, which we can measure through meters, and we know all the outputs, which we measure either through estimation techniques or meters, we can subtract, and the water left over is our real water losses. So any mistakes we make in data or any errors in estimation will actually show up in the real loss value. So the real losses will either be higher or lower than what they are in reality if we make any mistakes in the rest of the audit. And the estimation of the water volumes from the balance will be that diagnostic tool that Dawn mentioned before, and that will empower you to take action. So it's really about the actions you take that are going to save water and or generate revenue. So it's not about just doing the audit or the water balance, it's about taking action out of it so that you can actually save water or generate additional revenue into your system. So what makes up a water loss control program besides the water balancer audit? So the water balancer audit is going to be one part of that water loss control program. What are other things that make up a water loss control program? So go ahead and use the chat feature again. And some of you mentioned some of these programs already, but what are things that you think of in your utility that make up the water loss control program? So thinking bigger than the audit, what would you put in a water loss control program? So go ahead and take a moment and find your chat feature again and your keyboard and go ahead and type in your answers. And while we're doing that, I will actually go scroll back up through the chat feature and I'll pull out some of the things that were said earlier when we talked about a water loss control program. So let me see, hunting for water leaks was one that came up. Let's see, monitoring water loss, leak detection, finding water leaks. Let's see, ways to mitigate.
A lot of good ones coming in now, Heather.
Okay, good. I will move back down. Okay, let's see. So we have leak detection program, accurate customer metering, data accuracy, SCADA trending, meter calibration, changing out residential water meters, metering, loss of meter accuracy, meter testing and replacement, meter changeouts, estimating water use when making taps, meter changeouts, detailed flushing records. That is great. All of those ideas, all of those ideas and more are what makes up a water loss control program. We also have a couple more coming in. Detailed flushing records, excellent. Leak detection, meter calibration, zone meters, distribution system rehab, fire department records. So on the screen, you'll see some of the same examples that you guys just typed in, and then some additional things like improvements to system data, goals for the program, tracking data water usage by utilities, the fire departments, customer education about water usage and that sort of thing. It's part of the bigger picture of water loss control. It's not necessarily part of the water balance piece, but again, if we take a bigger, more expansive view to water loss control, what we also want to think about is what happens on the customer side of the meter. So if customers are not using water efficiently, that's not good for you or the customer. So you can actually think about those types of programs as well. You know, what are you asking customers to do to save water or look for leaks in the home, that sort of thing, you know, unidirectional flushing, billing systems. So all of these things make up the water loss control program. So again, what we want you to think of throughout this training is a much bigger picture of water loss control than just the audit. You know, while the audit is one piece of it, we want it to be thought of as a bigger program. So has anybody been doing these types of activities, but you didn't think of them necessarily as part of your water loss control program? So how many people have been out there and maybe you've been doing things, and many of you put in some, you know, really good ideas of things that you've been doing, but perhaps you were not aware that it was part of a water loss control program. It was just things you were doing. So has anybody sort of had anything brought to mind where, hey, I didn't think about it that way? And, you know, in a training that we did in another state, one of the things that came up was the fire department, where they hadn't really been thinking about the fire department as part of their water loss control program. But it turns out that they were a really important part because the fire department was doing the hydrant testing. They were actually the ones doing the hydrant flushing as opposed to the water utility. So they're operating and maintaining hydrants. And if they're not taught properly about, how to prevent water hammer and things like that, it can cause problems in the system. So they hadn't really thought about how important the fire department was in their water loss control program, because they were more narrowly focused on what was happening in the utility itself. Okay, so we're going to move on to triple bottom line benefits of water loss control. So as Dawn mentioned before, we want to think big picture again with the water loss control program. So we often think about money or finance as a really important benefit from a water loss control program, and surely it is. So if you're doing an action that can generate additional revenue into your system, that's a really good benefit for your utility. So you're going to increase revenue. If you're doing something that decreases the cost, like maybe you're doing something that prevents leaks from happening, like a water hammer program. So many leaks occur because we have water hammer in the pipe. If that happens and we do something to reduce the amount of water hammer in the pipe, we'll have fewer leaks. That will save us money. So we do want to think about those financial benefits, but we want to think bigger and also think about other benefits. So environmental benefits can be important. So thinking about what happens when water leaks. So when water leaks, it's typically your pipes are in the street. So the water line breaks, water runs down the street. It can pick up debris or dirt or anything else that happens to be on the street, is going to run down the street and potentially go into a water body. So it might go into a storm drain and get into a water body that way. It might be close enough to a creek or some other water body to get in that way. But what could happen is you're ending up with water that could be contaminated with surface contaminants, or even just, excuse me, the chlorine itself can be harmful to aquatic life. So we want to think about those kinds of environmental benefits of reducing leaks. Also, there are environmental benefits of not removing water from whatever your source is, whether that's a surface water or groundwater resource. You don't want to be pulling water out of that resource and just treating it and then leaking it out your pipes, because that isn't doing anybody any good. So we want to think about the environmental benefits of doing water loss control activities. And then finally, we want to think about social benefits. And social benefits are any of those benefits that accrue to your customers or your employees. So these are the people type benefits. So if you're having lots of emergency breaks and you institute a water loss control program that's more of a planned action where you can plan repairs, that's going to help your customers, because you're going to be able to tell them in advance that you're doing the work. You can make sure the work is done as least disruptive as possible, maybe in the hours that would be the least disruptive to customers and that type of thing. If your customers see you doing activities to reduce water losses, that can be very beneficial, because they realize you care about the utility and you care about saving the resource. And if they see that, they might be more willing to support the rates that you charge. For your employees, it's no fun to be just running from break to break to break. You would much rather have a planned day. So allowing them to have a much more planned day can be a good thing, where, again, we're trying to do things that will make the utility run more efficiently and effectively. So in dealing with water loss, you're going to have a lot of other things that will improve in your utility. So thinking about how the things you do can help your customers and your employees is really important. And the three things together, again, constitute what we call the triple bottom line. So financial, environmental, social is really important to keep our minds open to all three types of benefits and not just narrowly focus them on money.
Heather, we wanted to run that poll real quick before.
Oh, sure.
Takeaways. So, James, I think if you can run poll 4 right now, that would be great.
Launching it now.
So hopefully you all see on the screen a poll question of how much value do you see in having a water loss control program? And you have 4 options there. Not much value, some value, but not worth the effort, moderate value, worth the effort, and considerable value, and very much worth the effort. So go ahead and select the answer that best fits how you feel in terms of the value of a water loss control program.
Leave it open for another 10 or 15 seconds or so. Looks like we've got about 2/3 of the folks have responded. Okay, gonna close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Should be able to see the results now.
So what you should see is it's absolutely fantastic because most people, 80% of the people, saw considerable value, and those who did not see considerable saw moderate value. That's fantastic. That's what we like to hear, is that people see a value in this. And that will help us as we go forward, because our goal is to really help you achieve as much value out of your program as you can. So that's really what we'd like to do, is make sure that you have that opportunity to get value out of your program. So just some key takeaways before I turn it over to James. One is that water loss control is a comprehensive program. It's much bigger than just a water balance or an audit, although that might be a place you choose to start. Think bigger than just that alone. Actions taken should be based on data, either big picture data around, say, an audit or a balance, or component data that you dig in deeply about one particular part of your system, say meters or leak detection or something like that. It's important to consider that full range of benefits, not just the financial benefits. We want to talk to you as we go through the training program about questioning your assumptions. And there's a part of water loss that gets into this idea of unavoidable losses, or losses that occur in all systems and there's nothing you can do about them. And we want to question those assumptions, because maybe there is something you can do about some of those losses, and not just accept at face value. There's no way to change that. And then finally, to implement a comprehensive water loss control program, we'll take cooperation and coordination between different departments or types of personnel. So if you're any utility above, like having 1 employee who would have to do it by themselves, if you're bigger than that and you have multiple people working on your utility, you're really going to want to look at having more than just yourself involved in this. You really need the cooperation of many. So I'm going to turn it over to James to talk about having a water loss control team and getting more participants in the program.
So, water audits have obviously been required in Tennessee for quite some time now. And, one of the questions that you should be thinking about is, whether you have the right team put together for developing your audit and also for water loss control in general. One of the best outcomes that we see from doing audits and starting a water loss control program is the crosstalk and interdepartmental cooperation that those processes really foster. All of the system data comes onto the table, processes get to be reviewed by the group, and you really get a chance to see how all of the pieces fit together. And that really promotes, I think, bigger picture understanding within the system, so that there's a broader understanding of how actions taken or not taken impact and benefit not just individuals or individual departments, but the utility as a whole. You can't do all of the things all of the time. Choices have to be made, and having that bigger picture understanding, I think, helps with that process. For a water loss control program to be successful, everybody really needs to know, what the system's doing, why they're doing it, what their role is, so that it doesn't become just an exercise in collecting data for collecting data's sake. It's really about, collecting useful data that you can use to improve your operation. As Don and Heather both pointed out, it's about, taking action based on sound knowledge. And I think that the next few slides here about the teams really apply to you, if you're new to water loss control and water auditing, or if you're really an old hand at this. The biggest issue is that you need a lot of different inputs, both for an audit and for a water loss control task team. So the step one is to essentially form that team or task force, or if you already have one, to maybe review who's on it and see whether you have the right group of people. Processes change over time, and sometimes expanding the team is an important step to make it a little bit better. And again, we see this in large systems, we see this in small systems, particularly when it comes to the audit. It is often sort of put in one person's hands. It becomes one person's responsibility. And while sometimes, that's a necessity, because particularly in small systems, people tend to wear a lot of different hats. And you may be one of those people who sort of switches roles as required. But unless it's absolutely necessary, putting the entire responsibility for an audit or developing a loss control program on one person's shoulders really deprives you of, the most beneficial parts of developing that team. And that's sort of the unsiloing information and the broadening understanding. So what I'm getting at is that water loss auditing, water loss control works best in a team format. Best way to get going is to start that team. And make it up from different people from different departments within that utility. And that way you get all the sort of proverbial hats, but you don't have one person wearing them all the time. Again, it's difficult to do by yourself. Developing effective strategy requires input from multiple systems, multiple sources. You need supply information, sales information, operational data. You need to know about your infrastructure. You need to know about the financial aspects, both revenue, income, and expenses for improvements that you might want to make. What we often find once the team develops is you realize that departments are tracking what's important for their specific needs and goals, but might be working in a virtual vacuum and sort of not communicating much with other departments. And we'll often find that multiple departments are tracking similar information in very, very different ways for slightly different purposes, and unsurprisingly coming up with different results. So customer service might be tracking water usage, and sales and operations might be tracking it as well. And you may actually end up with two slightly different volumes there. We also often find that once people get together and sort of start doing the group thinking, that you realize that existing reports could be much more broadly useful within an organization if maybe one or two additional data points were collected, or if they were combined with information from another department. So for example, a systems operations department might have a meter testing program. That's main goal is to ensure that customer meters meet a plus or minus 2% accuracy threshold. And they might test meters for a lot of different reasons. They may do some random testing. They may test meters that are being pulled out, and they might test meters at customer requests. But it could be that in the reports that they're developing, they're not tracking why the meters are tested or what the actual error was on those meters that passed. And when you think about plus or minus 2%, that's a 4% range, and that could be significant information. So and this is again something we can help you with, but one of the things we often find is once you get the team together, people start thinking about what else can we do with that information? How do we take information from different departments and put it together to make a sum that's greater than, or a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts? At a bare minimum, your team should have people from operations. You should have some folks from management. They're typically, guiding strategy and helping prioritize. You need finance folks involved in the process for budgeting purpose. And IT is often very, very important, particularly as systems get bigger and bigger. As I said, you're pulling data from a lot of different sources, or might be creating or updating reporting to meet your needs. And the IT folks are often very critical to doing that process or fostering that process. But who's going to be on that team and how broad it's going to be really kind of depends on how your system is set up, the data you need, and what the best sources for that information are. So, think about, having folks from meter or meter reading in there, customer service, folks that are involved with infrastructure and GIS. I mentioned billing and finance, and potential outside groups in the Q&A earlier or in the chat. We had people mention the fire department. If you happen to have an active fire department, or like one system that we worked with, an actual fire training school in your area, they may be significant users of water that you might only be monitoring indirectly. They might be doing a lot of the flushing and testing. Street department may be using significant amounts of water for street cleaning and things like that. Sewer department as well. So we'll talk about this in much greater detail in the next training session, but don't just think inside your organization. Think about users of water that you either don't monitor, or who you might only monitor indirectly. And again, sort of recalling the components that Heather talked about when we're talking about the water loss control program as a whole. There's a lot of things in there, lots of data sources, a lot of collecting, a lot of strategy development and implementing action plans. And you can't do any of this without a team. Step one is, if you haven't already, establish your task force. If you have one, I would say sit down and make sure that you've got all the critical players on that team. This is really about unsiloing information, promoting understanding in the group, promoting accountability. The audit part in particular is a once a year kind of activity, but water loss control is a year-round activity, and it is an ongoing process. It's that journey, not the destination. And so, accountability is key. You want to be able to find and use your best data sources, and then again, understand how issues and actions are going to impact different departments in the utility, as well as the utility as a whole. So, start your team now. If you don't already have one, make plans for regular meetings. One of the ways to maintain forward momentum is to meet and keep that ball rolling. We are here to help. That is a significant part of this contract, is technical assistance. So, if you need assistance facilitating this, or have questions about who should be on your team, give us a call. We are happy to help. If you do this and take this team approach, again, you're going to have a whole that's greater than the sum of its parts. And if you can't meet in person, with the whole COVID situation that's going on right now, a lot of us are working remotely, and obviously all the Dons in Tennessee, the rest of us are not. That's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be formal. We can go virtual. A lot of systems are already doing this, and it doesn't have to be, formalized with those in-person meetings right now. We like to say, don't let what you can't do stop you from doing what you can do. And again, we are here to help. So with that, I think that ends the formal part of our presentation. It certainly ends the formal part of my presentation. And we've got Q&A. We're here to answer any questions that you might have. You can use the chat feature, and Heather and Don, if you want to jump in and add anything while we roll into that.
So if you can't stick around to ask questions, feel free to reach out to us. Our email addresses are listed here, and we thank you for sticking with us. If you do have a question and want to chat it in, we'll stick around for a little bit. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to the program moving forward.
And as was mentioned a couple times, we do have free assistance available through this contract, or no cost to you. It's free because it's paid for by Tennessee. So if something comes up before the first training, feel free to reach out to us. And then throughout the entire project, if you want assistance of any type with this water loss program, please let us know. And be creative about the types of things we might be able to do for you. If you want us to help you with hosting a water loss control team meeting, for example, we have a couple different virtual platforms such as Zoom that we're using today, but we have other ones as well, and we can host a meeting and help you get your group together if that's something that would be useful. So be creative about the types of things that we might be able to help you with as we go along with this training program. And then I guess one other thing I'll mention is we're going to try to be, building in interactivity as we go along. So we will use features like the chat function and potentially small groups and other types of technologies as we go along. So we will try to make it, as interactive as possible. It is a little more difficult when we're in this virtual environment versus in person, but we will try, as much as possible to give you guys a chance to interact during the training.
I think we're good to go. Thank you everyone for attending, and we look forward to the rest of the sessions.